We've got some carbon steel cold handle pans. We're going to clean these up. To start with, we're going to apply some chemical. In this case, I'm using a commercial degreaser. This is from Sam's Club. It's a great product. It is very harsh. You can also use vinegar. Let those pans soak for a little bit and just start scrubbing. I'm using some abrasive scrubbers. That's going to help remove the rust, any old finish or seasoning, as well as anything else that's just cooked on there. Sometimes you find they've been painted, and it can take a great deal of elbow grease. So be prepared to do some scrubbing. Now, it's not necessarily important to remove all of the former patina. In the case of the heavier pan that you see here, I do want to remove as much as possible. I have a near perfect pan, and I want to get that to a nice gloss, smooth finish so I can have an excellent non-stick cooking surface. And so we're going to clean that thoroughly. We're going to hose those off, and then we're going to hang these to dry, and then they're going to go into an oven to preheat and further dry them before we apply any oils to them to season them. So real quickly, I do want to talk to you a little bit about what you should expect when you look for these cold handle pans. So now you'll notice here that these two pans are not created equal. One is a little bit thinner, and therefore it's lighter. The National pan here is actually coming in at just a little over 8 ounces. This is a 16 gauge steel. The next pan is about a 20 gauge steel. It does come in considerably heavier. However, because of its weight, it's not going to warp as badly. It's going to distribute heat more efficiently and more thoroughly across the pan, and this makes it a better cooking instrument. That said, there's a trade-off with the weight and the durability and efficiency in cooking. So we're out here today, and we're going to season a couple of commonly called cold handle carbon steel pans. These were manufactured en masse by a number of companies. National, Acme, they're branded Acme, but a number of different companies used that brand. L&G Manufacturing was a large manufacturer of these. Bromwell still manufactures them today, more in a stamped steel or all stamped steel. And this is a stamped rolled steel high carbon steel pan. They were manufactured anywhere between 16 and 20 gauge. And so the 16 gauge being the heavier. We're going to take a closer look at this one. So the very lightweight stamped National, and this one is a 20 gauge. And so typically these were called cowboy pans. Again, they were manufactured throughout the 1800s all the way into the 1940s. So they're pretty easy to find. They're not expensive, but they make fantastic cookware because they are fairly light. My favorite find of late is this 16 gauge. It doesn't have a brand stamp on it, but I do know that it's a 16 gauge. It weighs in at 14.5 ounces versus my National, which weighs in at 9.8 ounces, and this one is a 16 gauge. The main reason I like the heavier gauge is for delicate and fine cooking. This is going to perform more like cast iron, and that's one of the advantages of the high carbon steel pans is due to convection and conduction. They heat, transfer heat, and cook a lot the same way that cast iron does without all of the weight. So if you're packing, whether that's on horseback or you're hiking across country on foot, this is going to give you that weight advantage. So those are the basic things that you need to know. Some of the pans that you find today are remanufactured copies. That's the only other piece that I like to mention. You'll typically know remanufactured or copies that are recently manufactured, for example, from Bromwell's, they're going to be near perfect, nearly perfectly circular. The way they're rolled, there aren't going to be a lot of tool markings, simply because with modern engineering, we can produce these en masse to much tighter specs than we could have back in the 1800s or the early 1900s. So let's take a look at how I season these. And so just for starters, we're going to get these pans into an oven, which is my preferred method for seasoning these types of pans, cast iron as well as the cold handle steel pans. And one of the reasons I prefer the oven is it's going to be a less intense heat than doing it over an open fire. It can certainly be done. One of the things to consider anytime you're cooking with or restoring these steel pans is that because it is a 16 to 20 gauge steel, excessive heat will cause the pan to warp. And once warping occurs, it's near permanent. And so this is an example of a pan that's warped. It's difficult for me to show it to you. You can kind of see it there when we get the light just right on the pan in the bottom. So there's some rolling in the bottom of this pan. This pan is by far imperfect. I'm not going to use that to make any fine crepes. This pan has a near perfect bottom. It has not been overheated, and it's got a nice flat bottom. This is going to produce a crepe, for example, or anything else that I might cook that appearance is important, and I do competition cooks. Then this is going to be the pan that I reach for. So it's going to be easier for me to work with. So to start with, we're going to get these in the oven to reheat. And this is another one of my primitive cooking appliances that I just love, my Perfection oven. We're going to get these in here to reheat. And I've already got an item in here that's preheated. So we're going to preheat these. The oven is currently holding at about 450 degrees. And we're going to coat these with a coat of, my favorite is beef tallow. You can use just about any kind of an oil to do this. So we're going to go ahead and... So this ladle, we have already preheated this ladle to over 400 degrees. And you can see that once that oil gets on there, it's smoking. And in fact, I can't handle it for long because it's going to actually burn through my gloves. So what we want to do is, this is just high carbon steel. So we're going to treat it exactly the same way that we're about to do these pans. And what I like to use is either a nice cotton brush, or in this case, I'm using some jute material. So I carry this jute cloth because it makes an excellent brush. It allows me to get the oil into every part of this steel. And because this is high carbon steel, it's going to rust if I don't care for it properly. So by seasoning this very well, so I'm going to coat it with a nice coat of that rendered beef tallow, and I'm going to get this back into the oven. We're going to let that bake at just a little over 400 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes. So we're going to coat these pans real thoroughly. Once we've reached that 400 degrees, I'm going to just coat that with a nice thick coating of that beef tallow to make sure that we get to every part of the pan. We're just using that jute cloth. And with this handle, I want to make sure that even the handle is treated. And I want to make sure, pour some of that excess out so I'm not pouring on myself. We want to make sure that some of that oil goes up inside the cold handle steel. Rust can occur in there. So we want to get all of that oil into every crevice, every crook, nook and cranny. We're going to coat the entire outside of the pan. We're going to coat the inside of the pan. And once that's thoroughly coated, we're going to get that back into the oven upside down, just like that. I don't mind if there's some pooling or some drips on the outside of this pan, but I don't want those on the inside where it's going to affect my cooking and my nonstick surface. So we're just going to get that back into the oven. Again, upside down, and let that return to temperature. So we'll get this pan coated as nicely. Now I want to just kind of show you, in this particular pan, you can see I worked on this pan until I removed all of the former patina, and I've got it down to literally an almost glass-like finish. And the reason being, this is a near perfect pan that I was just fortunate enough to stumble across at a sale, and I picked this one up. And so this one's one that's going to be going with me in my personal cook kit. So I want to make sure that it's coated thoroughly and well, and I want to make sure I've got a nice, beautiful finish on this for a nonstick and convenient cooking surface. So as you can see, the pan now almost appears glossy. It's still smoking, just a little bit, and we're going to get that back in the oven. It's been about 40 minutes. We're going to pull that pan out. You look at that. You can see the glaze on that pan, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So you can see there's somewhat of an amber color as the steel has heated and that oil has glazed over on the pan and given us an almost gloss non-stick finish, and that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to put that back in for just a few minutes. You can typically touch the pan. Obviously I wouldn't recommend you use your bare fingers, but my hands aren't that sensitive to heat because I'm constantly grabbing these hot items, but it should come away feeling like glass, but no oily residue and certainly no stickiness. There should not be any sticky residue in the pan. We want a glass-like finish, and we know that that's a perfect season. Any tackiness means that the oil has not fully polymerized. So that's going to go from 450, maximum 500 degrees. At 500 degrees, it's going to smoke a lot. You're going to get a darker pan. Still going to be a strong finish. And of course, you can do this over coals. If you're going to finish your pans over coals, I recommend that you use one of these devices. This is a heat diffuser, and you can pick these up anywhere. I think Walmart carries them. I'm particularly fond of the one that folds up. This is in my cook kit at all times. This allows me to put my cast iron and my steel pans over the fire without overheating and warping them. This is going to distribute the heat more evenly. It also allows me to cook with a greater degree of precision. And so this is fantastic to have in your cook kit, and it's going to be very important to help you cook well and preserve the integrity of your cookware. And that's just a heat diffuser. So as you can see here, I'm cooking with that heat diffuser, and this protects the pan from direct sources of heat overheating small areas of the pan, which is going to increase sticking. It's going to give me less control over my food. I really like using those diffusers, and as you can see here, this pan finished well. Once you've applied the initial polymerized seasoning coating, you can begin cooking in these pans. I do recommend a couple of short cooks. One of the best things you can do is actually deep fry in these pans after the initial polymerization, but have fun with it and enjoy.